So tonight I want to show you 10 tips to better bird photography. And I want to say first, I'm no expert, but I have found through the years some things that's really helped me, and I'd like to share that with all of you. So tip number one, invite the birds to your party. The best thing about bird photography is that you don't have to go far to find them. With a few bird feeders in your backyard, you'll have all you need to get them coming to your house. This has the added advantage of setting up your camera and lighting just the way you want them. Bird feeders can be as fancy or as simple as you want. They even have bird feeders guaranteed to keep squirrels out, like this one. And not to be outdone, they now have ones guaranteed to keep bears out. Have you seen those? But notice he didn't get it, right? So it's guaranteed. Another way to draw birds to your yard is with the use of water. Birds love water, and if they hear water in your yard, they'll come. A bird bath or even a sprinkler will really draw them in. I remember one time I had the sprinkler on just for the yard, and I go out there, look, and the birds are all going through it, flying through it and stuff. So, I mean, it can be very simple. You don't have to have a big bird bath or waterfall or anything. They'll come if they hear the water. If you have a bird bath, try putting branches around it so that they'll perch there, giving you a natural photo op. So both of these pictures are examples of what I put around my bird bath. Just, you don't want them sitting on the bird bath, that's not a natural photo op. So this way you can get them in their own environment. Tip number two, you don't need expensive lenses for great bird photography. It's important to realize that bird photography is much more than just the camera or just the lens. There's no denial of the fact that longer lens, the easier it is to photograph birds, which are skittish, but the lens itself cannot make a good bird photograph. If you don't have a long telephoto lens, nothing stops you from taking a great photo of birds like ducks, geese, gulls, and herons that are large and easily approachable. You may not have the equipment to take a close-up of a bird in flight, but nothing stops you from taking a unique picture of a bird in its habitat. It takes a lot more than just a good camera and lens to become a good bird photographer. A decent DSLR camera body with a telephoto lens up to 300 is more than sufficient to get really good bird photos. How many here have at least a 300 lens? See, you can all be bird photographers. This was taken at 286. What a great bird photograph does need is quality and direction of light. My favorite position of the sun is right behind me so that there's no shadows on the bird. You're getting it full on. Good composition, you need that also for good photos. Knowledge about birds and their activities. Knowledge of the gear you're using. You can check online. I know every time I get a new camera, I always go online and I set it up for bird photography. They have that, and I'm sure they have it for probably every camera out there, except maybe a point and shoot. But knowledge of the gear you're using, proper settings, proper exposure, your physical position, and the 3 P's, patience, practice, and passion. And I think when I was talking about Frank earlier, teaching me the basics, the proper settings, proper exposure, he really taught that to me. And I'm sure almost everybody in here that's taken his classes feel the same. You might not have a long lens to get a close-up picture like this, but you can still get a nice picture in the bird's environment. So don't let your lens limit your shooting. Tip number 3, light and composition. Photography is all about light. Light has a few characteristics that make a photograph wonderful. Early morning and late afternoon light is usually the best time for bird photography. The light during this time is soft. Overcast skies make a really nice soft effect for bird photography, and especially for getting high key. Like if you've got a white bird and you've got the overcast skies, you can get high key images easily in camera. Luckily, the birds are most active at these times too. Some benefits of soft lighting are it doesn't cast harsh shadows on the bird. It brings out a glow to the bird's plumage. The example with this picture, you would not get these colors if this was not late afternoon. You just wouldn't. It's the lighting that's making it show up red like that. It gives a catch light in the bird's eye. A note here about shooting white birds. I always shoot to underexpose them. For this reason, I never use automatic settings, only manual. The camera will not allow you to shoot to underexpose if you're using automatic modes, unless you also use exposure compensation. And I found, in my experience, that's really undependable. It's very hard for the camera to deal with extreme light and dark objects. Therefore, the whites on the birds will be blown out. So if you've got a white bird, dark surroundings, if you do the bird from the camera settings, like the automatic, it's going to be blown out. There's no way that it's not going to be blown out because it's trying to compete with the dark around it and the white, and it just can't handle it. A lot of wildlife photographers prefer to use shutter priority, which is TV mode. And if you do and get good results, then continue to do so. But if you're not happy with the results, try manual. It's not that hard. Why I shoot to underexposed white birds. It's easier to bring out detail in the shadows, but impossible to bring out details in a blown out, overexposed image. You want a properly exposed image, and that means detail in both the shadows and the light areas. On some birds, the example here, you won't be able to get much detail in the black area on the head, but having a catch light in the eye helps bring out the eye from the black background. Composing a bird photograph helps you to convey your message in the best possible way. Bird photography composition is generally very simple. Follow a few basic composition principles will make a difference. Use the rule of thirds composition to place the bird off center and give the bird room to breathe. But don't let that confine you to using the rule of thirds. Is this using this picture? Is this using the rule of thirds? No. The bird is pretty much dead center. But look behind the bird and there's more to the story. I could have cut that out, but I liked it with the splash because it gives you a sense of where the bird's coming to, and you're giving him plenty of space to go wherever he's going. So don't let it just confine you that, oh, it's got to be the rule of thirds. It doesn't have to. Use color contrast by aiming for complementary backgrounds. And so often you can do that just by your position. I can't express enough how your position can change the picture with bird photography so much. On this one on the left, if you notice up in the right-hand corner, you see that there was like something, the brush or whatever was reflecting on the water. I could have come over farther and taken the bird from this position and got just the blue, but I like the way the colors from the bird and the color on the top kind of went together, complemented one another. You see that or no? Any questions so far? Use a clean background. One way you can do this is by using the right depth of field for your subject. This bird had brush in the background, grass on the bottom, you know, and it's like, I could have, if I used a shallower depth, or I mean a wider depth of field, narrower depth of field, I would have got the background and it would have been competing with the picture itself. So just be aware that you can really change your background by the depth of field that you decide to use for your picture. Tip number 4, transport the viewer into the bird's world. You get more pleasing blur of both foreground and background if you are at the same level as the bird, because you can use a wider aperture. Tip number 5, it's all in the eyes. Take a look at any photograph of a bird. What is the first thing that you look at? Anybody? The eye. Just like with humans. When you look at a picture, you don't look at their shirt first or look at their ears. You look at their eyes first, and then you let your eyes roam around and see the rest of the picture. It's the same thing with bird photography or animal, any human being or living organism or whatever that has eyes. Try to get that in focus. If there's no life in the eyes, they look dull and lifeless. Birds look lively when there's a light in the eyes. This light is called the catch light. By following a few guidelines, you can easily get better bird photographs. Always keep the bird's eye in sharp focus. It doesn't matter how good the picture is. If the eye is not in focus, you throw it out. It's no good. I mean, think like a portrait of a human, of a person. You look at a portrait and that, oh, the lighting can be perfect, everything could be beautiful, but that eye is not sharp. Who wants that? You know? Check for catch light in the bird's eye. That's easy to get if the bird is front lit. And that's what I was saying, how I like the sun right behind me, full on the bird. And make sure to photograph from the bird's eye level if possible. Tip number 6, fill the frame. In bird photography, we often photograph individual birds. And while photographing individual birds, it's always a good idea to fill the frame with the bird. The advantages of filling the frame with the bird is that it's easy to focus on the eye. It's easy to achieve a pleasing blur effect in the background. Another benefit of filling the frame with the bird is that you can oftentimes eliminate background distractions. It's easier to properly expose for the bird, and it's easy to compose in the field. Tip number 7, tell a story. Storytelling in bird photography is a way to express the time of day, mood, place, or activity of the bird in the photograph. Viewers should be able to picture themselves in the scene. Simply put, a photograph of a bird and its surroundings will give a better sense of story.
It's too hard to hear. We're getting so much background noise from unmuted people.
My good friend Rick Strobaugh.
Yeah.
We went out to Whitewater Draw in Arizona. He had the same camera as I did, the R5, right? Canon R5. Same lens, the Sigma 150-6, and this is what he took. This is what I took. Between these two pictures, which one do you feel tells more of a story? Oops. That one. It's like you can see there's lots of birds there, there's hills. I mean, it really tells a story of their surroundings. And mine could just be 2 birds. They're the only ones on the planet flying by. You know, there's not much of a story. And it made me realize after seeing Rick's like that, I thought I really need to broaden my horizons and bring back and not just go to the 600 millimeter, you know, bring it back and kind of get the whole scene. And these are just a few examples of pictures that tell a story. These, I love it. These pelicans, what they do is they just sit in the water and they wait for another bird to get a fish. And it's usually yeah. And so it's usually the cormorants. They're the ones who usually get all the fish. But then these pelicans come and they chase them and they grab it from them, you know, so watch for stuff like that. Here are a few tips you can follow while photographing a bird in its habitat. Make the bird an integral part of the photography by including it in its natural habitat. Show the interaction of birds if there's more than one bird in the photograph. This picture here, I was so excited to get. It's a calliope, two calliope birds, hummingbirds. One is the male, and he's doing a mating display for the female to try to get her on his side. Okay, and I was so excited. I've never seen it until this one time and never saw it again. So I'm like, 20 or 10 years, 12 years, that's the only time I ever saw it. Well, I came across this this YouTube video of it showing the display. So I'll play that. It's pretty interesting.
Spring is the time to nest before the desert is warm. Those birds looking for home. But the choice of rain will be hers. Is not important to us.
I don't blame her. I would do that too. I'd fly away if I saw that coming at me. What? Oh. Okay. So indicate the weather conditions by including either snow, rain, or mist. Tip 8, capturing their actions and behavior. Birds are always in action. They hardly sit idle. Capturing birds in action involves more effort and patience compared to photographing perch birds. I say that, but perch birds can be pretty hard sometimes too for them to come out from behind stuff. But here are a few tips to capturing birds in action. Photograph early in the morning or late in the afternoon when birds are very active. And by early in the morning, I mean early, like 5:30 in the morning, or be there and ready to let them get used to you a little and then shoot. Photograph early in the morning, use burst mode to take several shots during the action. Track the bird until focus is locked before pressing the shutter. And learn to anticipate the action either by observing or reading about them. Birds tend to ignore you when they're hungry. It's very easy to photograph them in action during these times. This bird was so close. It's like he would not, I wanted him to move away so I could get his whole body and get the, the whole reflection, but no, all he wanted to do was be right there. So I guess if I wasn't so lazy, I'd take a short lens with me too, but who wants to be changing lenses or carrying all that around? Capturing birds' behavior is much tougher than any other aspect, generally because birds become alert the moment you're in their sight. The alert bird is always trying to fly away and rarely will see its behavior. How many have pictures of the birds' behinds? Lots of behind pictures. You can observe actual behaviors of a bird when it's more comfortable. Here are a few ways to make the bird more comfortable. Wait patiently until the bird ignores you. Use a natural place to hide, like a bush or tree or something that obscures you. And visit the location several days in a row until the bird becomes comfortable with your presence or get the right opportunity. Or you can really go crazy and do like this guy. And no, I've never done this. I've never tried it. Anybody in here? Bruce, Debbie? The most interesting, I actually have the suit, but I've never used it yet. The most interesting part of, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have one of those too. Yeah. Yeah.
They're not that expensive.
No, they're not. But they work good in your backyard too.
Yes, I don't have green. I'm going to look like a desert.
No, but if you put bird feeders out, they'll come. They'll come. The most interesting part of bird photography is capturing their magnificent flight. This is very tricky aspect for beginners and pros alike. It's not easy to take in-flight photos that wow viewers. And these are just a couple of pictures of ones that I like that I took. The success with birds in flight photography largely depends on the birds as well as the techniques one used. Smaller birds are generally very erratic in their flight and also a bit more difficult to track since they're generally too small in the frame. I literally went out to this place. It was out at San Jacinto. Went probably 3 days in a row, and all I did was stand there and try to get these guys. And I mean, I probably shot for 2 or 3 hours each time. And it's like I maybe have 10 photographs that came out good because they're just so fast. They're darting around. They're hard to get. If you want to be successful with in-flight photography, start with larger, slower moving birds. Learn all the field techniques to capture the perfect photograph of these birds. I think of all my bird photos, I like this the most of everything I've ever taken. It was just luck that the shadow was there and the lighting and stuff. The larger birds are much easier to focus on and to track. Here are simple tips that will help you capture those magnificent flight photographs. Learn about the bird's flight patterns. And each bird type will have a different flight pattern. So it's not like you just, okay, birds do this. Some birds do that. Other birds do something else. So if you're going to go somewhere that you know what type of birds are supposed to be in that area, it helps to read up on them and learn a little bit about it ahead of time. Know their landing and taking off patterns. Track the bird for a while and let the camera achieve focus before pressing the shutter. Number 9, the background makes the picture. Take care not to neglect your background. It should be clean and simple. Too much clutter will distract the subject itself. Use your perspective and point of view to remove unwanted background objects from the frame and choose a large aperture to blur them. So that's what I was saying about moving one way or the other can make a big difference. It's very easy to keep a check on the background while taking bird photographs. Just follow these simple rules. Avoid taking bird photographs when the background's too distracting. And I know it's like you see a bird and you want to take it, and it's okay, you can take it if you just want it to go home and see what kind of bird it is, and but if it's a bad background, you're not going to do anything else with that photograph. It's better to just wait, sit there quietly, wait, and will fly somewhere else on a branch that's not so busy background. Wait for the bird to assume a good position to get an interesting background. Change your position. Sometimes just a few inches one way or the other makes a huge difference. Also, don't be afraid to go down low. Doing this may put the sky as your background. A note on getting dark backgrounds in camera. If you want to get a dark background in your image, you have to have the right ingredients. And I know now we can do Photoshop and get a black background, but to me, it's fun to do things in camera if I can. And you can do it if you have the right ingredients. You need the background that's in shadow, and the light on the bird itself is coming from either side of the bird. Can't have the sun behind you on this type of bird pictures. Any questions about that? For white or light colored birds, underexpose the bird itself and the shadow background will appear darker. 10, practice with common birds. Start with your birds in your backyard or go to the park and practice on ducks and other large birds. Practice shooting on the ground or in the water. Once you master that, try shooting them while they're presenting, flapping their wings. And once that's mastered, move on to getting them in flight. Another good place to practice is your local zoo. The birds are used to people and will allow you to practice with your camera settings and get used to different lighting experiences. Try and get them when they are doing something like in the picture below, where the bird is shaking his feathers about. It makes for a less static image. Tips for in the field. The better your camouflage, the more likely the birds will come near you. Wear neutral coloring and avoid bright colors. Make sure to remove or cover all reflective objects around you, including your equipment, your camera bag, cell phone, any jewelry you might be wearing. If you do find yourself needing to get closer to a bird, keep a low profile. Don't approach them directly, but rather move toward them in a zigzag pattern. Keep quiet and avoid making your quick movements and startling them. Also, try not to make direct eye contact with the bird while you're getting closer to it. Birds often choose your favorite perches, even if it flutters off before you can get your shot. If you wait silently for a few minutes, they may come back. Birds are easily startled, so keeping a camera from beeping to frighten it away. Turn off any beeps your camera might make. Tips on getting reflections. If there's a reflection, then try to include it in your shot. They can dramatically improve an image because they add interest. Early morning and late afternoon are the best days to get reflections, or best time of day to get reflections. If there's no wind and the water is still, you can get amazingly clear reflections. Choose a narrow aperture to maximize depth of field to ensure front to back sharpness. What do I mean by this? Anybody have an idea of why you want to maximize your depth of field on this? Bruce?
A narrow, well, when you're shooting at 500 or 300, 400, 500, usually at 5.6, 6.5. I mean, you're at a longer depth of field anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you want that focus, at least on I'm assuming the head a little bit in front and a little bit behind.
Close, but no. The reason you want to do the maximize the field is because you want the reflection to be sharp also. So on this, I probably used a 13 or 14 f-stop to get both reflections because it's a big bird. And so, you know, from where the reflection started to the bird, there's quite a distance. So that's why. If you see some pictures, you look through a magazine, you see sometimes it's like blurred. And that's just because they didn't use a deep enough depth of field to get both the bird and the image, the mirror image sharp. Okay, now we're going to do photographing hummingbirds. How many like hummingbirds? Yeah. Step one, how to draw hummingbirds to your house. There are dozens of feeders available. You can also plant hummingbird attracting flowers in your yard. But if you really just want to take photos, a feeder will, sorry, a feeder will likely bring in all the hummers you need. This is the type of feeder I prefer. There's only one hole for the hummingbird to feed, making it easier to control and focus on the hummingbird. And you also want to be sure that you don't have the type that the hummingbird can sit on, because you want them in the air, not sitting. And they'll sit and drink and drink and drink and drink, and you're waiting for them to move. And by the time they do, you're not there. Step two, get the right equipment. There's no way around it. To take great hummingbird photos, you have to have the right tools. Fortunately, some of the stuff is cheap, and there's a good chance that you already have some of the more expensive items. Flashes. This is the one area where most folks will have to shell out some money, because the most important equipment for hummingbird shots are your flashes. Yes, plural. 2 flashes are really your minimum for good shots, and 4 flashes will allow you to take best-in-class photos. There's more here. For you that are on Zoom, Bruce just got his 5th brownie. 2 flashes are really your minimum for good shots, and 4 flashes will allow you to take best-in-class photos. I use 4, 3 on the bird and flower, and 1 on the background. Why so many flashes? 2 distinguishing hummingbird characteristics are that they are small and they're fast. If you shoot without flashes, you can compensate for one or the other of those characteristics, but not for both. Unless you are satisfied with shots that show the wings as a total blur, we've all seen those shots, haven't we? You're going to need exposures that are between 1,000th and 1/10,000th of a second. The problem is that if you set your shutter speed that high, you will have to open your lens aperture up wide, which unfortunately will minimize your depth of field, resulting in most of the hummer being out of focus. On the other hand, if you reduce your aperture to increase your depth of field and keep the whole bird in focus, you will have to reduce your shutter speed to the point that the wings will seem to nearly disappear, which really isn't an attractive look to most folks. You want the hummer to sparkle. Hummingbirds get their jewel-like quality from the iridescence of their feathers. If you use only a single source of light, then the iridescence effect can appear flat or irregular. 2 or more flashes will put your hummer's images in a whole new category. Without a flash dedicated to the background, your background will be very dark, which I like at times, but if you want a more natural look, you need to have a flash pointed to illuminate the background. And here are some examples of pictures I took with the setup I'm talking about. I did this, it's not a hummingbird, but you can use the same concept and the same setup for other birds. How should I set up my flashes? This aspect of hummingbird photography can get very technical, and frankly, there are multiple systems and techniques you can use and successfully illuminate your photo. I'm going to tell you the system I use. It's relatively inexpensive and simple, and it works. It seems every camera flash combo is different, so I suggest you do a quick Google search or read your manual to see how to set up your particular system. Did you have a question, Bruce? Oh, I thought you were. Right. Commander and slave. More than likely, your DSLR's pop-up flash or an external flash mounted to your camera's hot shoe can be set up so it will wirelessly and automatically trigger your other off-camera flashes. The flash on the camera is called a master cannon, and on the Canon, I should say, and on the Nikon, it's called Commander. Did I get that right, Debbie? Yeah. And the other flashes are called slaves. Important point, if your camera's pop-up flash isn't able to be used as a master, which I think that would pretty much be on older cameras, but you'll have to buy a separate flash for that purpose. Not all external flashes have the ability to be a master, so you need to confirm this before you buy one. A money-saving hint, your slave flashes do not have to be the top of the line models made by the same company that made your camera. I've got one Canon and 3 Yongnuo, and I like the Yongnuo better. They're easier to program and they're $200 cheaper. So high-speed sync mode. If you have one flash unit, you will want to set your camera on the auto high-speed sync. This is because most cameras are limited to a maximum sync flash speed of 1/250, which is way too slow for most Hummer shots. By using the high-speed flash sync, you will be able to use a much faster shutter speed. If you're using 2 or more flashes, as I suggest, you don't have to set your flash units for high-speed flash sync because you'll only be using shutter speeds of 250 or less. Flash stands. Flash stands will allow you to precisely position your flash units. I use old tripods and they get the job done just fine. Just make sure your stand will allow you to get the flash at least 4 feet off the ground and have a wide base. And I'm going to pass these out, because we'll be talking about them. You want to? Wireless remote shutter release. For me personally, I do all of my hummingbird shooting handheld, but I realize that most people don't do this. I would suggest you use a wireless remote if you don't. It'll allow you to set your camera up and shoot remotely, thereby limiting movement, which can cause soft images. I personally find this limiting. It takes the ability to follow the bird around, achieving unusual poses out of the question. Because if the bird's there and you've got it set up, the bird's got to be there for you to get the picture. If you're hand holding, you can follow the bird as it comes down, as it goes away. So it's up to you. Lenses. You don't need a telephoto lens to take great hummingbird photos. If you have a 10,600 millimeter 2x8 lens, then by all means use it. However, hummers quickly grow tolerant of tripods and cameras placed close to the feeder. Ideally, you want a lens that's sharp and can focus quickly. My best shots have been taken with the Sigma 150 to 600, which is sharp and can focus at subjects within a few feet. I also use my Canon 300 2.8, and I honestly can't see the difference in the pictures. The bottom line is that the ability to shoot very close to hummingbirds means you can get pro quality results without pro quality glass. This was taken at 335. This one was 300 millimeter. Tripods. For many, mounting your camera on a tripod will dramatically increase your percentage of great photos. You will be able to pre-calculate your depth of field and pre-focus your lens on the exact spot where the bird will be, which means that many or most of your shots will be perfectly focused and the entire hummer will be sharp. You can set up your camera very close to the hummers. This will allow you to avoid cropping. In other words, you'll maximize your resolution and sharpness by using nearly all of your sensor, so you won't have to crop it so much. I put this picture on here because I thought it was interesting. I'd never saw a hummingbird and dragonfly that close together, and how there's not a huge difference in size. You know, and I know this is a certain type of hummingbird and other hummingbirds are larger and stuff, but it just, I thought it was funny how, you know, it's like the hummingbird, when you're taking a picture of it, it seems bigger than it actually is. Cameras. As long as your camera has a hot shoot or has a pop-up flash that can serve as a master, then you should be good to go. Nearly any high quality DSLR should work. Backdrop, poster board. You will want to set up a backdrop behind your feeder to avoid a cluttered background. I use a piece of poster board that I had printed at Costco. You can also try spray painting hazy patterns that imitate attractive bokeh in the background. I tried it and didn't like it, but you guys might have better than me. Yes, Bruce. Mhm. Right. Of course. Right. It'll go in and out constantly. Good suggestion. Your backdrop won't have to be very large. For my current setup, I use a 24 by 36 backdrop. You may need a different size depending on your camera combo lens. Shots of hummingbirds flying with nothing else in the frame start to look kind of stark after a while. So I like to include flowers in the same plane of focus as the hummer. And if you're using a bird feeder, I just kind of like twirl it around the feeder so that what you're seeing, you may get a little bit of the feeder in the picture and just Photoshop that out. Also, drip a little of the hummingbird juice into the flower, and the hummingbird may just go to the flower instead of the feeder. Here's the setup I use. All of these need to be set up in the shade. There can be no sunlight or on any of the setup, and that means the bird, the flower, no sunlight at all. You may need to purchase a large umbrella or similar type of shading apparatus. And on here you can see I've got 1, 2, 3 on the bird, and then the top one's going just to the background. Anybody know why I've got one facing this way? Any idea? I mean, I'm not shooting that way, so why do I have one pointing this way?
Want to highlight the back of the bird.
No,
No.
no. Huh? No. You don't want shadow on the background. If you don't do that, you're going to have the bird, but you're also going to see the shadow on the background. I do. The flash that's facing this way, that's to keep the shadow from going onto the background. Yeah. Yeah. The most important part is to have fun and enjoy the beauty of nature and enjoy the challenge of capturing it. Focus your energy and time in learning all the core principles outlined above. Prove it to yourself that you have so much passion that you go out and photograph birds every day or as often as you can. Remember that proper techniques will always outsmart equipment. Make every attempt to make amazing photographs of birds. Enjoy photographing birds. That's the secret to success. As always, please be mindful of the animals you're photographing. Please don't disturb them in any way if they're nesting or feeding their young. If you find you're distressing a bird, you're probably too close. this is fun for us as photographers, but we got to realize that for the birds, it's life and death. So we don't want to be the one that causes death just because we want to get a picture. And that's it. That's all I have.